Hello and welcome to this communication workshop for women's allies with Dr. Bettina Palazzo. My name is Maria Magdalena Heinrich and I am the coordinator of the Women's Informal Network. Just to introduce to some of you who are not familiar with the network, what it is. The Women's Informal Network, also called WIN, is a professional network for women in the international development sector. And WIN has grown very quickly since 8 March 2016, when it was founded, from 8 to over 800 members globally, representing about 88 different UN agencies, as well as some IFIs, NGOs, governments, and universities. We have 5 chapters in Rome, New York, Geneva, Vienna, and Nairobi. And we have one popping up in Germany as well now. And the purpose of the network is to promote inspiring women's leadership and to strengthen women's managerial abilities. And the network does this by exchanging advice on career development, sharing best practices in work-life balance, providing informal mentoring and coaching, organizing networking opportunities. Usually we did that face-to-face by having monthly lunches or aperitivos, and we have some WIN walks for those in Rome. And yesterday evening there was a gelato tasting. And so now, obviously with the COVID, everything is virtual, but some of the face-to-face activities are starting up again. And then we invite motivational speakers or stakeholders to discuss relevant topics for professional women in the development sector. And we're serving also as a focus group on policy issues that are relevant to our institutions. So this event today is part of our series of career and life development workshops that include the mentoring and coaching initiatives. And today I have the pleasure of welcoming again Dr. Bettina Palazzo, who already delivered a first presentation on communication for fearless women, which was very successful and which you can watch on the replay in case you missed it. Bettina is a doctor of business ethics consultant, and basically she helps companies to improve their culture of integrity and to bring a breath of fresh air to their ethics and compliance management. And today I have also the pleasure to welcome some male colleagues and friends, which is very unusual for us because we are all about women. But we will discuss how to react when you witness a situation where somebody gets treated unfairly and you feel you have to react, or a female or minority colleague of yours is being discriminated and you wish to support them. So in this interactive workshop with Bettina, participants will explore how they can stop being passive bystanders and become active upstanders and allies in situations where others are confronted with discrimination, sexism, or bias. And I believe that knowing how to speak up for others will also help you to learn how to speak up for yourself with courage and confidence. So now I have the pleasure to hand over to Bettina for a first part with the introduction and the presentation, and then we will move into some group discussions. Bettina, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Great. Thank you so much, Marilena. So a pleasure to be here again today. So last time we were looking at what can women do if they're in tricky situations and they need to put their foot down with confidence and still kind of involve the other side and not create enemies, because we want to be peaceful warriors, right? And today we will look at the male side. For me, these two concepts are really complementary. We need to strengthen women, but we also need to work hard to transform organizations, and we can only do this with the help of men. In the last 50 or 100 years, if you want, women have accomplished a lot. If you just imagine that in the 50s and 60s, women in Germany, Italy, and Switzerland, I don't know the legislation in so many countries, but you had to have a written permission from your husband if you wanted to work. So just to give us a sense of accomplishment. So this is something we can't really imagine anymore today, right? But if you look at the rest of the situation, there's still a lot to do. So let me share my slides and show you what we will do together, what to expect. Yeah, so the idea of the male ally training is that we think that most men are good-willed feminists that want to help to balance the gender ratio in organizations. But then that sounds very inspiring and lofty, but what is it actually what you can do every day? And this is what we want to accomplish here together, to show you how difficult these situations can be if you're not prepared. I have this little story here. You might, some of you might remember it, where a couple of weeks ago, Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the EU Commission, went to visit Mr. Erdogan in Istanbul together with her colleague Charles Michel, the president of the EU Parliament. And since Mr. Erdogan is known to be not quite the women-friendly role model, he played this diplomatic trick on poor Ursula and only put the guy on this chair of honor, and Ursula had to sit far away from the man on the sofa, a little bit lower, which, I mean, and you already see it in the setup, which was not a very friendly signal to women's rights. And you also see very clearly in the body language of Mr. Michel that he feels very uncomfortable because he didn't know how to react. I mean, this was a very high pressure diplomatic situation. So Ursula, we have a video of the event where she just stood there, and when she realized that there was no chair for her, all she could do was say, and then she quietly gave in and sat on the sofa. Whereas, and also Charles Michel was completely unprepared for this situation. You never see these situations coming. So that's why it's good if you are prepared. And poor Charles Michel later confessed to the press that he couldn't sleep at night because he felt so bad. So I'm imagining that he would wish that he had attended my training. But what does it really mean being a male ally? So it sounds kind of self-explanatory, but then of course, so what we will do, first I tell you what we will do. So we will get you into the ally attitude. I will give you some tips and tricks what you can do every day to become a male ally. And it's little things, but they can have a big effect over time. It's like the compound effect. You start with little things, and if we reach a critical mass of men who do it, it will have a good effect. And one secret weapon for being an ally to not only to women, this is a magical tool, active listening exercise that we will do after this short introduction and the tools and tips and tricks that I will share with you. All right, so what is a male ally? No, first, I'm lost in my flow here. So as I said before, we accomplished a lot already, women, but now there's still lots to do, and it's clear that we can't do it alone. So if we look at we can look at tons of numbers and statistics and so on and data, but I like to do a little trick. I always, before I go into an organization, I Google X company or X organization leaders and see what Google shows me in their pictures. And so this is what came up, and I invite you to try it yourself if you want to, what came up in my search. And if you're looking for the women here, so if you want to count them, they're not so many. So this is kind of the situation, and this is why we need the help of the majority to change this. And yeah, as I said before, men are good willing, but it's not so clear how to do it. Of course, most men said, yes, I want to do something for women, but how do you do it? So maybe since some of the men that are already here, I presume they are already probably allies because they came here voluntarily. So maybe you can share in the chat if there is something that you are doing already. That would be interesting. And Marilena will share it to me because I can see the chat when I'm in presentation mode.
Sure.
So don't be shy. Let us know what you're already doing. Well, you came to this workshop, which is already the first kind of check for being a male ally, being open to the idea.
So to our male colleagues, is there anything you're actively doing to support women and to have more women on pictures, not only pictures,
for instance, so in
better
the long
represented,
run?
better represented? Well, maybe they have to think about it.
Maybe, yeah, I think that was a little bit too a sudden question. All right.
Oh, so we have one comment from Mark. First step was to admit how little I know, which is also very important. Thank you for sharing, Mark.
Yeah, that's actually the same point I will make later. Yes,
yeah.
because men are in the privileged position, they don't have to think about the role, and that's really the first thing how I define, or at least here Superman in my slide is getting the advice from this lady. What's the role of a man in feminism? And the first thing is listen to women's concerns. That's why we do a listening exercise. And the next one is challenge your own, or think about your own male privilege and realize, so for instance, you can always ask yourself the question, what would my career have looked like if I had been a woman? Yeah, think about it. And then the last most important step is holding other men accountable. If you observe sexist behavior, or not very helpful behavior with other men, we know from science, from research, that if a man shares this in a supportive way with gives feedback to another man, this is much more successful than if women speak up on this, because then you can have in a defensive role. And so we want to leverage the advantage position of men for this. And it's important to say that it's not about rescuing women. That's why I'm playing with the picture of Superman. So don't put your cape on if you do this. Your motivation should not be so that you are the hero, but more that you're challenging other men, and that's help that we would really appreciate. And yeah.
So, Bettina, we have one comment and one raised hand by a male colleague.
Go ahead.
So I would like to give the floor to James Taft, please. James.
Yes, good afternoon.
Welcome.
Good, thank you. So I just came in and I might be off in my comment. So I work in the FAO Investment Center and I manage a fairly big program to carry out food systems assessments. And so in the last, let's see, 3 months, I probably hired over 250 people across the globe. And I'm not amazed, but it has struck me how in hiring people, and these are in 60 countries, how systematically you see this under remuneration of women for the same skill set, for the same years of experience. And so with our team, we have said, in interacting with our local offices and EU delegations, how we need to really look at this equity or this inequity issue, because it's, I'm not naive, but it is so endemic and you see that. And so I think a lot of probably what you're talking here today, it kind of then gets translated and it underpins kind of these structural inequities that ultimately, give opportunities and remuneration or do not to men and women. But it's, we ourselves in this activity in my team, and we have a great team, are really having to focus on these very specific things that determine that a man might get $450 a day, and you see the woman with the same skill set, same years is like 200.
Wow, that's a
Thank
pretty
you.
heavy difference. Yeah, this is not so much what we are talking about today. The structures are super important. We are more talking about the daily habits what men can do, and what you are doing, of course, is already super important, that you notice this and you bring it to the surface and make it transparent, because very often, especially in the pay gap, we have the problem that this is not transparent, but because you're not allowed, or you have all kinds of legal restrictions to talk about the difference in pay, and then you can always say no, but it's because of the experience, and it's a tricky subject, but it's very important to and sometimes even the pay gap sneaks in without people actually noticing, so that because you have this unconscious bias that women's work is less important than men, and also women can have this, it sneaks in, and you tell yourself stories that it's justifiable, but it's not. But there are all kinds of technical and statistical tools to avoid this. But this is not really what we're talking about today.
Yeah, but just one very quick thing, Bettina, sorry, because it's a follow-up question to the question we raised earlier about the picture and the women being represented. So very quickly, James, of those 250 people that were hired, how many approximately were women? That's a question from Dubravka in the chat, and I think would be
important question.
At a global level, I would say on our team, 70 to 80% are women. So if you look at the analysts, if you look at our program support, communication, facilitation, it's easily. But at the national level, so these different food system experts, I would put it more at maybe 40%.
Interesting. Okay, thank you very much.
That's very interesting. That's what I keep observing a little bit in most UN organizations, that you do have on the one side quite a good level of female representation, but it doesn't really have the impact because this female representation is still undervalued. So that's a very specific situation I observe in this context. And yeah, that's of course not something you want. You can even tap yourself on the shoulder and say, but we have 40% women, but we pay them half of what we pay men. So that doesn't really advance the situation. Okay, so let's continue. And so we jump right into my ideas what men can do every day. And as Mark already said, that he realized that he doesn't know so much about the female experience. That's really the first most important step, because until recently, very often men said, no, I'm never discriminating, I'm gender blind. Or organization always said, no, we are a meritocracy, we only look at the performance, which mostly was well, not a conscious lie, but was mostly not really true, because they never really checked on it. So the first step is really is to getting bilingual gender, to get gender bilingual and not gender blind, and ask more questions. Then I have a little test for you that's very practical if you want to find out if something you are thinking or saying about a woman is potentially sexist. So it's really easy but very powerful. You just flip it. Before you say something to a woman or about a woman or decide something about a woman, turn the situation around and imagine, would I do or say the same thing to a man? So just as an example, before an important presentation of a colleague, would you tell the guy, oh, you look great in these tight jeans today? Probably not. Yeah, this is a little bit an extreme example maybe, but you would probably, with all kinds of comments about looks, that's one very practical test. And I have some other examples for you, maybe you also later. Then of course there's better listening. That's what we will do in at the end of this presentation, and amplifying female voices. And for this, I also will show you, we will do a little exercise in a minute. So let's dig a little deeper into how can you educate yourself about the female experience. And here I would like the men in our Zoom room to think a bit, how many female authors have they read in the last year? Or yeah, that do they come to your mind? Because the interesting thing is that women are so used to putting themselves in the shoes of men, because we grow up in school, all the big books and romances you read from Shakespeare to Voltaire are mostly male protagonists. So we are living this transsexual experience all the time, but men mostly not, because they are just the protagonist in the book, and that's it. And then I also already provided a link to a collection of really cool feminist movies that will also expand your horizon on the female experience. After the workshop, I will also share a resource document where I have a little list of books that you can read, also romances that are very helpful to understand what it means to grow up female, like for instance in the great novel My Genius Friend by Elena Ferrante. So here is homework over the summer for you that you can instantly do and even enjoy. And now to flip it to tested tests, I have another example to make it clearer how we have different filters for male and female. So if you look at this picture and imagine it would be a woman on the picture, you would probably say, oh, that is not a demeaning picture, it's not sexist. But just because we change the torso or some other parts of this picture, you instantly see, now this is really not something that you would imagine that you would hire this guy as your new deputy secretary general, right? Also, I see James is no. All right. So and we also have this big discussion now in Germany, where you can see the power of the twisted to tested test, where we discuss, so should we gender neutralize words? Should we have policewoman, policeman? Or because the argument is always, well, when we say policeman, we also mean policewomen. But if you twist it and imagine that here, Andrew, policewoman, would say, being called a policewoman doesn't bother me because I know it covers both men and women. Then you see it doesn't really work. Yeah, you don't believe Andrew here. So this is something I invite you to do. It is a fun exercise to try this out in your day-to-day work life in the coming weeks, and we can even imagine that you share it amongst each other, these experiences. It would be interesting to know. Yeah, and another idea that is something concrete to do, little things every week, comes from JP Morgan, and they thought, well, what would happen if every man in our company would every week spend 30 minutes of his time to have a coffee with a talented woman to find out, yeah, this is again the educating part and also the attention part for the woman. Then they could spend 5 minutes on congratulating a female colleague on her successes, and then another minute to talk positively about this woman to others. So if you imagine that every man in an organization would do this, we can almost feel that this would move the way women are perceived in the organization. So small actions over time, big impact is the idea, and you can instantly start to apply it already this afternoon if you want to. And now we come to amplifying female voices, and here it's important again to be a little bit gender bilingual and know that if you are in a minority in a meeting, for instance, you're the only woman, you tend to hold back your ideas, especially if they're not perfect yet. And that's also the other way around. When I was teaching a year ago a group of MBAs where there were only 2 guys and the rest women. The men were as shy as women normally in this situation, and I had to encourage them first that they spoke up, and then it was no longer a problem. So this is why it can be necessary for men to amplify female voices, because there are all kinds of barriers to this. And to explore this, I brought us some small mini case studies. So let's imagine this one. I'm in a Zoom meeting and we are discussing a new strategy for our department. I know that my colleague Martha always has some great ideas on this. So far, Martha has not said anything, and I have the impression that she feels uncomfortable because she does not want to impose her opinion, especially in Zoom meetings. So what should I do? And here you can type again some ideas in the chat if you were in this situation, or maybe you've already been in this situation and have some good ideas what to do or not. Yeah.
In the meantime, I can acknowledge some of the other comments that were made.
Oh, yes, please.
People are thinking about it. In the chat, they're saying, well, how many men colleagues do we have here participating today? Which may be an indication.
Yeah.
A comment by Sven saying, men writing women in books or in film series is another problem. And sometimes he only notices it when he watches Netflix with his wife, and she points it out to him.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, it's sometimes in this thing that it needs a certain level of sensibilization of men to actually see this is a very important point. Yeah.
Okay, and then we have a couple of comments coming in from female colleagues and friends saying that they would encourage Martha to speak up. They would invite her to share some comments, perhaps contributing using the Zoom chat. Mark says it is a good idea to consult in advance, to divide up areas for comments and help get points in advance.
Yes.
Invite everybody to contribute. Discuss bilaterally with her afterwards.
Yeah.
I would first write to her in private chat, and then someone agrees with Mark and Shantu. What about something like, this is really interesting and complicated. Martha was sharing some really interesting views on this, but I can't explain them as well as she does.
That's
Thank you,
picture book. Congratulations. So this is actually what I'm proposing. I'm a big believer in scripting, because having sentences and strategies prepared, because these situations are coming, they come up all over again. I especially like also the idea to ask permission from Martha, because maybe she has didn't have the time to prepare, and you don't want to put them on her on the spot. So that's a very good idea. So this technique is called passing the mic, and what you can just say, actively say, Martha, what's your take on this? I know you're an expert in. And then it's done. Yeah, you put her, you open her the floor, and it's an elegant way to do this. Yeah, and I like really the last comment, which was even better than my suggestion.
Well, there is another suggestion that is reminding everyone that no idea is a bad idea, and also not putting Martha on the spot.
Yeah,
rather to invite everyone to share their ideas and encourage them. Yeah.
Right. Also, what we had before, having the meeting before the meeting is something that's always a good idea. If you know already, if you have the time, of course, that the set of the meeting is known before, Martha might be a little bit shy, she has great ideas. So do this before. That's just also a good idea. So let's try another one. So this one is, I'm in a project meeting with a partner and we're discussing the upcoming communication plan. Katharina has just made a good suggestion, but no one has responded to it. 5 minutes later, Peter repeats the same thing, only louder and more confident. So this is called bropriation. So when the brother, is stealing your ideas, very often it seems it's something that men do unconsciously, and for me it's kind of hard to understand where it comes from, and that men really don't notice it. But it obviously has to do with similarity bias, that we actually hear people that are like us, look like us better than people who don't look like us. And we also think that they have better ideas than people that don't look from us. So that's one of the deeply ingrained biases that we have in our brains. So Marilena, do we have first suggestions on how to deal with this?
Yes, we have an idea from Annika. She says, repeat her idea while crediting her.
Yes.
Circle back to the fact that this has already been mentioned. That's what we try to do in our team at work, she says.
Okay. So yeah,
example. Yeah,
definitely. So this is exactly how you do it, and this is how this can also be done by female allies. I mean, we don't only need, we also need the female side. So everybody can do this. The important thing is that somebody notices this, and then you do this thing that's called giving proper credit, and it's very much similar to what Annika said. So yes,
and also
had made this point before. Please tell us more.
Exactly. Yeah, Mark had suggested this. Thank him for repeating Katrina's idea.
Yeah.
And
yeah. But you see, it seems kind of easy and obvious in this kind of safe, no stress situation. But if you maybe in a heated discussion, first noticing that this had happened is not always a given, and then having these kind of the quick-mindedness to say this, and also in a calm way, because you don't want to say, hey, you're stealing Katrina's idea. You don't want to do this because most likely it has not been done on purpose. So I have one more case. So this one, I'm in a meeting.
Sorry, Bettina, we have one hand raised.
Please.
Very quickly, Ekaterina.
Yes, sorry. Thank you very much. I was just wondering, what if nobody notices it? You know, I have been in a situation of Katarina. I give ideas, nobody listens to them, and then somebody else tells. So I get very frustrated. So I really don't know what's the way out of it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very good point. So you can do the same thing and say, oh, thank you for picking up my idea. Let me just explain this and this a little bit better.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. and stay calm, yeah. And also then you can even after the meeting then write an email where you, as I suggested in the meeting, blah blah blah. So you even have something written and you CC it to somebody else, so you have a trace.
Okay.
And don't And also try to have a meeting before the meeting, or try to talk about finding allies before, and educate them, and hey, have you noticed this, and make them understand that this had happened, so they might pay better attention to it before. If you have a trusted person in your team, of course.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure. Okay, are we ready for the last case?
Yes, please.
Yes, okay. So I'm in a meeting. Every time Barbara is trying to make a point, our colleague Paul is interrupting her. Barbara's face is starting to turn red. Also, this is a classic one. We know from tons of research that women are 3 times as likely to get interrupted in meetings, and not only by men. Again, this is the thing that subconsciously female voices are less valued, and you just jump in and interrupt them. And often it's not noticed. I mean, it happened to me recently. I was at a dinner at a friend, and our friend interrupted me frequently, and I was a bit angry, and that I shared that with my husband after the evening, and he hadn't realized. He thought, but you were talking a lot. So what are your suggestions here to disrupt the interruption?
Okay, one comment that we didn't address earlier was very true, that in safe situations, we know how to react correctly. But when we are ambushed by something, women often feel lost. And so having those little speeches ready and the little tactics or strategies is definitely helpful. Dubravka says she would ask Barbara to repeat what she was saying as she was interrupted. Or Dick says, good example, obviously depends a lot of the context and the personalities. Perhaps using humor could be an option. Peter, you're interrupting Barbara again, with a smile. I love what you're saying, but I really want to hear the end of Barbara's sentence.
Yeah, you're so good at this. Yeah.
And Anna says she would politely ask Paul to let her finish her sentence. Yeah.
Yes, so this is what you do. You disrupt the interruptions. Of course, it's always better to prepare this before the meeting, or you could introduce a non-interruption policy for the whole team. Yeah, and then manage this, and so nobody gets blamed and feels bad. But then you can say, please remember our not interruption. We agreed on this. And so here you can say, I think Barbara has not finished it. I would like to know. So that way you always give value, that she has something to say. And I just wanted to add that this interruption thing is also something highly intercultural. If you are in Rome, you know that Italians are polychrome, and they like doing stuff at the same time. And when they talk amongst each other, it can also be a sign of a high level of engagement. Whereas if you in a monochromous culture, like in Switzerland, and you address a shop clerk while she's still talking to somebody else because you have just this tiny little question, they get really mad at you. So I think the overall thing is really think respect. How can we manage this? And it happens that we interrupt each other, and it's not always a sign that we want to be bulldozers. All right. So with this, we kind of set the scene. So what's the attitude? What are all the little tips and tricks you can do every day very easily? Thanks again for James' input that we need the structures as well, but that's kind of on a bigger level, and we can do a lot with these little daily habits. Now for our listening exercise, I will first introduce you to the concept of active listening, which is really my secret weapon to all kinds of things, from ethics to diversity to appreciation, because it's really a game changer how you interact. And the thing is that very often we only listen to respond because we already have other ideas, or we want to win, or we know how to fix the situation. I mean, it's very often it's not even bad intentions why we want to respond. It's also that we are enthusiastic about it, but that way the other person doesn't really feel heard, and we don't really get everything the other person wants to say, and we don't get the things that the person doesn't say, because very often we have all kinds of feelings, emotions, and underlying messages that are in the message somebody is saying, but then there's much more behind. And if you don't have these really huge ears, it's very easy to miss it, which is a pity, because if we twist our listening skills just a little bit and tweak them, then we can have so much more possibilities on both sides and create this atmosphere of inclusion and validation, because we don't barge in and just say, oh, you have to do this and this, and then everything will be fine, because that's kind of patronizing for the other person. So the idea of active listening is more like a coaching situation, where so the strategies are pretty straightforward. You focus on the other person, you take care of your body posture, that you don't look out of the window on your phone or yawn or what other body language negative points you can collect. And I mean, everybody has been there, everybody has been listened to badly, everybody has listened badly to other people. So that's the easy part, but the hard part is to turn it around. Then you just listen, you shut. So the most important thing is shut up. You can even count in your head somebody saying something, and then you count 1, 2, 3, and don't say anything. And you're only allowed to make some noises like aha, I see, yes, and then you shut up again. And again, because very often, if we give people more space for expressing themselves, they are like in French they say vide ton sac. So you purge everything, and you might find that just the little nugget that you haven't found before. And that's the magic of the being listened to well, that the listened to person can come up with their own solutions that they would not have found without you mirroring them. So if you've done this purging part, then you can label their feelings, like say, oh, you must have been so angry when Peter always interrupted you. And then you shut up again, and the other person feels recognized in their feelings, which is again validating. And only then you can start asking open-end questions, and you can paraphrase their statements to make sure that you understood them right and they feel heard. And you can also mirror their body language. If they do like this, you can do the same. That can be helpful, because then the mirror neurons between our brains kind of start circling back and forth. Paraphrasing is important. It might sound a little bit weird first, because you basically just repeat what the other person is saying, but with different words. But it has two effects. First, it's this mirror effect again for the other side, that they see, oh yes, then they feel really understood. Sometimes they even understand something more about their own situation because of this. And if it happens to be a tense situation, the paraphrasing is something like a de-escalating thing. If you're paraphrasing what your partner just said, it's very hard to, if you're angry, if you happen to be angry with them, you can't really stay angry with people if you say, so you're saying you couldn't do the dishes because you had 200 emails that day, then you're already more in an understanding mode than if you say, you never do the dishes. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So what are some? So then the next phase is asking the right question. And here I have also again this kind of scripting practical questions, because open-ended questions are not so easy. We tend to ask questions that you can answer with yes or no. So am I missing something? Is there something else you would talk about? Tell me more works very well. Interesting. And so avoiding the yes, no, maybe questions, but try to use who, what, when, where, why, how. So you can cover a lot of space with this one. What do you think? What does da-da-da mean to you? It seems like you're worried about this and that. So that you just feel how this kind of opens the conversation. And with this, these tools, we will now in a minute transfer you into breakout rooms. In breakout rooms of 3 persons. So we have 2 people who will interact, and 1 person, I don't have a third arm, one person that will observe. So I let you imagine that somebody comes to you and wants to discuss a problem that he or she has. And then you make, so the one person says, oh, I had this experience, I got interrupted in a meeting. And then you react in one round, in about 1 minute, it's quickly done, with bad listening skills. So you check your phone, you say, oh, it's because you're not self-assured enough, you should speak with a louder voice, give advice, be judgmental. I guess you don't need coaching for this. We all know how bad listening skills go. And then in the second round, you apply all the guidelines that I will also put in the chat. So you have a little PDF with the structure for good listening skills. So you apply them there. So you do this once, and then you switch roles. So the person who listened first is now the talker, and the other way around. So every person of the two participants gets the experience how it feels on your own skin if you've been listened to well or badly. And the third person just observes and gives feedback and says, oh, you did this well. There you ask a closed question. Yeah? So that's helpful. And with this experience, so we have 10 minutes for the whole thing. We can then report back to the plenary. Okay.
Thank you, Bettina. I believe we will have to do it a bit faster than 10 minutes.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
it's 10 minutes to the end. It's 10 minutes to the end of the workshop, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So we'll have to do this all in 5 minutes.
A little bit
so
faster.
I would say 1 minute of the good behavior, the bad behavior, 1 minute of the good behavior, and then a little bit of feedback, because we also want to hear back in plenary some of the lessons learned and then have a closure.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So
I put the active listening exercise guideline in the chat.
Okay.
So you have it in your chat room, so you can look at the guideline. Is it visible to everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I still have to move a couple of people because some people are leaving, and so I'm trying to have all groups of 3. There are a couple. Okay, now it should be all groups of 3. So please turn on your cameras, as this makes the exercise more
so much better. That's important.
So you should have a link so that you can join your group.
Marilena, how much time do we have? 5 minutes for this?
5 minutes, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
If you could please all join your groups as fast as possible so that we don't waste precious time for the exercise. I can see a couple of people have not joined the groups yet.
Hi, Marilena. I was alone in room 14.
Hi, no. Well, you are assigned to room 13 with Serge and Tamar. So if you could please join that group. Can you join it, Sanduka? Yeah. It makes it very difficult if people are not joining the groups, because then it doesn't work out with the 3. Oh, this is so much nicer with all the cameras on and we can see the people. Brilliant. Thank you for joining us back in the plenary. I hope you had a good experience with the exercise. It was a bit difficult, and I apologize for some of the groups because not everyone joined the groups. So I had made it perfectly fitting the 3 numbers, but then if people don't join, then you end up having 2, then we ended up having 2 male colleagues. So I had to shuffle around a little bit in the groups. Anyway, the question that we would like to ask you is, what did you feel? And where did you struggle? So in the two versions, in the good version and in the bad version, how did it feel like? Any experience you would like to share? Any thoughts? It would be interesting. We have a couple of minutes. It's 1 o'clock now, so I realize we should be closing now, and apologize for going a little bit over. But I think it's interesting to capture some of the lessons learned before the closing, if you don't mind. So anyone who would like to share the thoughts, you can raise your hand, the raise hand function, or you can write in the chat how you felt. Serge, please, you have the floor.
I mean, I would love to have a lady go first, but I see Dick and I have ordered the...
This is okay. This workshop was for you, male allies. So please go ahead.
So, I mean, first and foremost, I think it's a very good exercise. I mean, particularly in terms of sensitization. Unfortunately, the time was far too short. I think it would be good to dedicate a little bit, to have the opportunity to dedicate a little bit more time to these role-playing and exercising. But it also highlighted the personality issue. I mean, I had Sanduka, I don't know if she's joined us again, but she had this fantastic smile that, you know, made it very difficult to be either confrontational or to say anything. So she totally disarmed one, and she was very good because she was very calm, had a great listening capacity. And just a very short remark before I whisk off, but I think it is the sensitization and raising awareness and changing cultures is very important, because what we're looking at now is really changing not only decades, but also maybe centuries of cultures. And as I was trying to look at my library of books, it's absolutely true that the majority of the books are written by men. But to my credit, I was watching actually a film that I will recommend on Netflix. It's called The Medicine. It's a Swedish film. And it's all about a female work environment. And it's a fantastic film and gives the insight, particularly for men watching it from the female perspective. So it's fantastic. Thank you. Over.
Thank you very much for sharing, Serge, and again for forwarding to other male colleagues. Dick, you were next.
Oh, yeah, I was with the brilliant Sonia. I was about to open my heart on something that really frustrated me, and she was being the bad listener. It was really good because she did it so well. She looked at her phone, she moved, she played with a plant. And I learned 2 really important things. One, it's bloody annoying and it's really hard to actually open your heart when someone's doing that. It was really much more powerful. She did it really, really well. I can't believe she ever does it in real life, but she did it really, really well. And it was just so disarming and disabling and distracting when I was trying to sort of say, oh, I'm so frustrated in this, and I was asking these questions. She was just sitting there playing with a basil plant of all things. Secondly, the second lesson was not only did it hold me back from venting and talking about what I wanted to do, it actually put me into a worse place, because it was actually a negative spiral. Rather than just stopping me from emoting and hearing someone's view, I actually felt worse. And she did this in 45 seconds. So I was thinking, what happened to this going on for half an hour? So it was a really, and thanks to Sonia, who did it really wonderfully. There were 2 lessons. One, it just totally stops you from doing what you're trying to do. And secondly, it can actually make you feel worse at the end of the conversation rather than just the same place. Thanks, Sonia.
Thank you for sharing, Dick. Dubra.
Thanks. Actually, unfortunately, we didn't manage to finish the exercise as it was not enough time, so we didn't get to a good listening. But in a bad listening, actually, it was something that happens quite often, I have to say, because Fatma was exposing her situation, no? And Mario was actually listening. She was looking at her. She didn't play with the phone or anything. You Actually, she was, in an active position of listening. But then immediately when she finished, she said, "Oh yes, good. But my problem is I had this and this and this situation." So immediately going into her own problem without reacting, without making questions, without anything. And this is actually, I have to say, something that happens quite often, at least in my experience. I did experience this, that the person just goes straight, or like in a way, if you want to comfort someone or help, you just immediately say, okay, I'm also experiencing problems. But it doesn't really help you to how to solve your own, no? So I thought it was interesting. Thanks.
Thank you very much for sharing, Dubra. EES Secretariat.
Hi, actually, my name is Elena. I just joined from professional account. I'm sorry. I did this exercise with Sven, and as I joined the webinar closer to the end, I actually missed a lot of explanation. And once Sven in the beginning was not listening to me, for me it was a real situation. So I asked him, "I'm sorry, but are you listening to me?" And here he smiled and explained that it's a part of the exercise. So I can confirm it feels very frustrating, and it's totally inconvenient when there is no eye contact and you don't feel that you are listened to. It's very disencouraging.
Thank you, Elena, for sharing your experience. And Sven was also commenting in the chat box that it was really frustrating to have to play that role of the not listener. And I happened to jump into when they had the good experience. And in fact, Sven was actually listening and doing it properly, I have to say. So, thank you. Okay, at this point, I would like to hand over to Bettina for some closing remarks from your side. Please, Bettina.
Yes. So what I think this is really such a great exercise, because it makes you feel on your own skin what it means if somebody listens badly to us, and it and how almost a physical relief it is if somebody listens well to us. And this happens all the time, and we are mostly not really trained in active listening, and it has to do with personality, of if you're an introvert, an extrovert, what culture you come from. But what I learned, what I find most convincing, is why we are so bad in listening, because as a kid we often have problems being listened to. So when we finally have a chance that somebody listens, we just keep talking. So that's why we are so bad in listening ourselves. So just to release a little bit the bad feelings that people have if they listen badly. So it is a skill, you can learn it. It needs a lot of practice, because it's hard to do this active listening job, but it's very rewarding if you do it well. And switching to curiosity to find out about the other person is a mantra that can help you doing this. And this workshop, I just wanted to give you the big picture, also to connect to structures, because this for me is part of an overall program that I call Respectful Workplace for All, that is aiming at creating this allyship culture, where you start with an assessment, you look at what are the policies and procedures out there. I work with the top leaders, because we need the top tone from the top, so they can craft powerful messages and people see that they understood the concept, because why should anybody do it if the top leaders don't understand it? And then we have these two parts that you experience. Some of you hopefully experienced both of my workshops. So we have the part with the male allyship, so we can push the tone from the middle and empower and win the male allies. And we have the female part that helps women to stand their ground with grace and helping also the men to change and get sensitized. Yes, and so please reach out to me on LinkedIn if you want, and stay in touch and keep this dialogue going. And let me hear about your experiences when you apply all the toolbox that you had today, from twisted to tested, to reading more female authors, to listening, to active listening. So it was very much fun to work with you again, and see you next time. Thank you, Marilena, for this great moderation and time management. It was awesome.
Thank you so much, Bettina, for joining us, for your very concrete tips. I would like to get you a round of applause from everyone.
Thank you.
So we will be sharing Bettina's presentation so that you also have access to the resources that she has put together and her tips and the reading material, etc. And also the link to the recording of this session. So if you would like to go back to it, or if you would like to share it with colleagues, that's certainly possible. Should you not be an active member of the Women's Informal Network for the ladies, you can write to me and we will be happy to include you. For our male colleagues, you can become a sort of formal, but it's not formal because it's an informal network. You could become an ally, which means that we can share with you some of the tools and the updates that we are usually sending out, and invite you to seminars like this one, for example. So if you're interested, you can write to me via email. At this point, I would like to thank you very much also for staying 10 minutes later, and I hope to see you again very soon. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you, bye-bye. Great workshop, bye-bye.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Nice to have you.
Bye.
Bye.